Over recent years, it's become fair to say that Sonic the Hedgehog has declined in popularity since his glory days in the early 90s, and the blame generally goes to two things. One is the changes in popular genre in the gaming industry, and two, the third dimension. 3D Sonic games have become very divisive among gamers and are often criticised for numerous reasons, from inconsistent gameplay to story to poor technical performance. The thing is though, very often I feel these reasons are over-exaggerated. Now there's no doubt that some games are stinkers, but even those are hardly the worst games ever made. This countdown consists of all 15 3D platformers in the Sonic series. Now please note that I'm only counting the games that focus on platforming, so no Sonic Riders games, and whilst Sonic R has 3D platforming in it, it is a racing game first and foremost. I also won't be counting Sonic 3D Blast Flicky's Island, as despite its name I'm not really sure if it qualifies as a true 3D game. Of course I can only judge the versions I've played, which I know in some games it is the worst version, such as the PS3 ports of the adventure games 06 and Unleashed. However, since I own Sonic Heroes and Shadow the Hedgehog on both the PS2 and GameCube, and it is unanimously agreed that the GameCube versions are superior, I'm only going to be counting those versions. Lastly, although they share the same titles, the two versions of Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Lost World are almost completely different games, so I will be counting them separately. I would say please respect my opinion, but let's face it, this is 3D Sonic. One can dream, but I know there will be some highly controversial placements on this list, so let's get on with it. This is my top 15 3D Sonic the Hedgehog platformers. When Sonic the Hedgehog was released in 2006, it quickly became notorious for its poor quality. This was caused by a rushed development, but why was it rushed? Well, various reasons, but one of the biggest was because of Nintendo. Sonic 06 was planned to be released on all three of the new consoles, the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3 and the Nintendo Wii. However, when Nintendo gave Sega the specifications for the Wii, it was discovered that the console's lower power and unique control scheme supposedly made porting the game impossible. The Sonic team was split in two, with one struggling to complete Sonic 06, and the other working on the new Sonic Wildfire, which would later be released as Sonic and the Secret Rings. Both games suffered, but Sonic and the Secret Rings to me is far, far worse. Alright, let's start with the positives. For a game released just 4 months into the Wii's lifespan, it looks great. It runs at a consistent 30 frames per second, and I do like the storybook style cutscenes. It's an interesting way of telling the story. The music is okay though, rather forgettable. The only songs I like are the opening to Pirate Storm, Evil Foundry thanks to a certain YouTuber, and the main theme 7 Rings in Hand, although I do prefer Crush 40's version of Sonic and the Black Knight, and it plays way too many times here. Every time you select a mission, finish a mission, the final boss, you quickly get tired of it. Sonic and the Secret Rings is definitely superior to Sonic 06 when it comes to performance, but that's where the positives end. The controls, or lack thereof, are terrible. Even something as simple as thrusting the Wii remote to do a homing attack can be unresponsive. Jumping can't make up its mind whether or not it wants to hurt an enemy or if it gets me hurt. Jumping and accelerating on rails is for some reason the same button as accelerating, making rail grinding pretty much impossible, and when Sonic moves backwards he's not only sluggish but neither he nor the camera turn around. And the level design does not work with these controls at all. The boss fights will require you to thrust the Wii remote, causing shoulder cramps, especially in the final boss. Then there's the process of collecting the world rings. You need to complete certain missions to unlock more missions to collect the rings. Nothing in the game tells you which missions to play, so you're more than likely going to waste your time on a mission that you don't need to play. The motion controls make the game unplayable, and that's really saying something for a game you're barely playing. Now I don't own an Xbox 360 and as such a Kinect, but if Sonic and the Secret Rings have shown me what a heavily motion based game with a controller is like, then I dread ever playing Sonic Free Riders. But the worst defense Sonic and the Secret Rings makes to me is that it's one of the biggest causes of Sonic 06's poor quality, and yet this game, while technically superior, is much, much worse. Now I haven't played games like Bubsy 3D or Superman 64 or God forbid Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, and I'm not saying Sonic and the Secret Rings is on those levels as bad, but when it comes to the games I have played, this is the absolute worst. Well, at least for something original. Sonic Lost World for Wii U and PC has been one of the more polarizing games in the series. However, the 3DS version has been a little more agreeable. After playing the unpatched Wii U version with all of the red rings, I actually thought that the 3DS was the better Lost World. Now, however, I wish I could go back in time and slap myself in the face, because this version of Sonic Lost World is horrible. While I have no issue with giving Sonic a run button, holding down the R button on the 3DS for long periods of time is very uncomfortable. Sonic's movement feels very loose and awkward, which thanks to his floaty jumps makes even simple 3D platforming difficult. Unlike the HD version, there are tons of levels where using the wisps and the admittedly better parkour system are mandatory, and if that wasn't already bad enough, most of these moments are above bottomless pits. This game is filled with trial and error, and it's such a shame because the game starts so well. Windy Hill is a great opening world, but every level after that just gets worse. Desert Ruins introduces more puzzle elements the rest of the game is filled with, and later levels can go on for over 15 minutes. The 2D segments are also a pain due to how close the camera is to Sonic. I'll give praise to the boss fights. The not so deadly 6 were pathetic in the HD version, but here, while still pretty pathetic, it at least feels like some effort was put into them. Collecting the red rings is already very hard to do in the Wii U version, but here it's so much worse. If you're a completionist, or the completionist, then you not only have to collect all of these red rings, you also have to get all of the S ranks in the stages, and there's the S ranks in the hard mode stages, and the truly awful special stages. You control Sonic with the 3DS's gyroscope, which I can't show off properly because to record this I have to have my 3DS wired up. When playing, you will be turning and tilting the 3DS all over the place, both looking silly and getting very tired. While not the best the 3DS can do, the game looks nice besides some pop-up in certain levels. The cutscenes are ripped right from the Wii U version and are horribly compressed, and the music is mostly the same as the HD version, which is great. The Nintendo 3DS version of Sonic Lost World has pros, but is let down by awkward controls, ridiculously long levels, and way too many do or die moments. But Sonic Lost World was just the first in a 3-game exclusive deal Sega made with Nintendo, the others being Mario and Sonic at the Sochi 2014 Olympic Winter Games, and the 2 Sonic Boom games, Rise of Lyric and Shattered Crystal. So really, isn't it more of a 5 games deal? Both were supposed to serve as prequels to the Sonic Boom TV series, even though it was announced that the series has no continuity between episodes and the games have no continuity with each other either. Both games were received poorly and were commercial flops, but Shattered Crystal by Santaru Games did do better and it got a sequel in the form of Fire and Ice. But Rise of Lyric by Big Red Button seemed to be bringing the series back to Sonic 06 territory. And that's not just an overall reception. Many of the things wrong with Rise of Lyric are all too familiar. Long load times, bad frame rates, plentiful glitches, sloppy controls, among others. Rise of Lyric, which has to be the stupidest and most pointless name I've ever known a villain to have, is achieved with the CryEngine, a very accurate name. The game was being developed for PS4 and Xbox One, but due to the 3 games contract with Nintendo, the developers had to suddenly program the game for a Wii U instead of a console that couldn't really handle the CryEngine well with less than a year before the game's release. In fact, the contract's announcement happened before Big Red Button even knew about it. At least, that's what I heard. Rise of Lyric's biggest problem for me is its repetition. Levels are huge and all have the same incredibly basic puzzles and constantly have you stop and fight enemies with very basic combat. The speed sections are a little more interesting but don't require me to do anything more than jump and quick step, assuming the game actually gives me time to react to these obstacles. These sections also have the worst frame rates and the rest of the game is already very choppy. The graphics are barely above a PS2 game, a tragedy on a console with such gorgeous games like Super Mario 3D World, Mario Kart 8, and heck, Sonic Lost World. Cutscene animations are fine and the voice acting is great. Seriously, why do so many people hate Roger Craig Smith as Sonic? I think he's the best one by far. Not to put down Ryan Drummond or Jason Griffith, but they eventually got great. Roger is the only one I think has been good from the start. He not only captures Sonic's personality perfectly, but he always delivers his lines with confidence. However, while I can praise the voice acting, I quickly get annoyed since the characters never shut up when you're playing the game. Now, I haven't encountered too many glitches, with the only big one being on my first playthrough, where Knuckles got pulled through a wall in the 2D section and was sent to the next 3D section as if the game also wanted to be done and over with. Standard controls are okay, but things like this boat control horribly, and this sub is way too big for the space you're given. If you're willing to look past the performance, then you will find a game that is perfectly average. But I, for one, cannot look past this performance, and this game is just too boring for me to enjoy. I would only really recommend watching the TV show. That's actually really good. The first Sonic game I ever saw advertisement for. Back then, my 7-year-old self's only experience with the series was maybe one full playthrough of Sonic Heroes, and even then I still thought this looked ridiculous. Now, Shadow getting his own game made sense as his memory loss was never recovered, but guns and aliens? I wouldn't come to play the game until 2014, and even then it was the god-awful PS2 version, which, just to say now, is worse than Rise of Lyric. Just to simply put it, and this mainly applies to Sonic Heroes as well, it has horrible collision detection, a very choppy frame rate, especially Shadow the Hedgehog's case. I mean, look at this. And for this game in particular, some of the loading screens, especially those for the cutscenes, can go on longer than Sonic 06. Even though the game is supposed to explain Shadow's past, it pretty much requires you to play Sonic Adventure 2, where you already know what several things mean. The story is filled with plot holes. For instance, if Gun killed Maria, then why did Scaryface here become their general and blame Shadow? How is he even on the Ark? If these videos are present in the Ark, then why do they show up on Earth and in the Black Comet? How can you be wrong about Gerald Robotnik when he tried to kill everyone? Better question, what here is canonical? As in, what leads to the final story, since all the endings are non-canon apparently? Having to play the game 10 times to unlock the final story is not only repetitious, but pointless. Why bother with the whole good or evil thing if there's a final story that has Shadow save the world anyway? The missions themselves are also very repetitive, and if you don't know where everything is, they can take forever. And the level themes themselves are also repetitive. Take the normal path for example. You start in Westopolis, then Glyphic Canyon, and then Prison Island. After that is Sky Troops, which is just Glyphic Canyon again, and then it's Iron Jungle, which is just Prison Island again. Even Westopolis and Lava Shelter have clone levels in the form of Central City and Gun Fortress on the Dark Path. Boss fights are just the same. The Hero Path has you fighting Black Ball twice for example. The 10 endings all end in boss fights, but 3 of them are Black Doom, 3 of them are Sonic and Diablon, and 4 of them are the Egg Dealer, and the fights for each boss are exactly the same. Even after the slippery controls of Sonic Heroes, the developers somehow made it worse. Now, defenders often use the excuse of Shadow being on hover skates, which makes sense if it wasn't for 2 things. 1, Shadow had hover skates in Sonic Adventure 2 and controlled just fine, and 2, why make it realistic if it means the controls are bad? It's hard to make Shadow even move in a straight line. I will admit that the gun gameplay is fine, and it is very satisfying just being able to shoot like a madman when one of your meters is filled up. No matter how high your meter or score is, both sides still attack you even when you're at the end of the Dark or Hero stories. Take the cutscene before Central City for instance, which has Shadow speaking with Black Doom with loads of Black Armed soldiers right behind him, but the moment you start the level, a Black Armed soldier starts attacking you. Some levels also require you to attack members of your own allegiance with your ally telling you to do that, and then scolding you when you do it.
You should be able to use your homing attack to get through. Stop that!
Rude, you just told me to do that! The graphics are bleak, the non-CGI cutscenes are horrendously animated, and the voice acting is some of the worst in the entire series, and then there's lines like this.
We're on our way to the Ark, so I guess that means we're going too.
I actually asked Jason Griffith if that was a script or recording error. He couldn't really remember, so he just said it was a recording error, but that wouldn't explain the subtitles. Interesting. Shadow the Hedgehog is boring, ugly, poorly written, with sloppy controls and a pointless, time-wasting structure. And this is just the GameCube version. Even Sega seems to hate the game, since just 1 year later they tried to reboot the franchise. Yep, 5 games up on the list, and what I consider to be the best of the bad 3D Sonic games is Sonic the Hedgehog. This game is actually a guilty pleasure of mine. Now when I say that, I'm not talking about the game as a whole, I just mean I like playing as Sonic quite a lot, and I like playing as Shadow depending on the stages. Sonic 06 is heavily flawed, but I don't think it's the worst Sonic game, and certainly undeserving of frequently being called one of the worst games ever made. The story is about as bad as Shadow the Hedgehog, and I really can't decide which one I hate worse. But while I hate the story, just playing the game isn't too bad. It may not have the name, it may not have a Chow Garden, and doesn't even come close to the quality, although I would argue that Sonic Adventure 1 is much glitchier. When it comes to the gameplay formats, Sonic 06 really is Sonic Adventure 3. Freedom to explore, much of the same moveset, different playable characters. I really ask, how is this not a Sonic Adventure game? The gameplay is slow, especially at Silver, and has too much focus on combat with some of the cheapest enemies I've ever seen in a Sonic game. While I like playing as Sonic, Shadow and Blaze, Silver and the other Amigo characters can range from decent to horrible. Silver has potential, but here it fails. That said, I wouldn't mind seeing another try at this. Control is very precise, which I do find better than Shadow the Hedgehog's ice physics, but I swear, unless you're jumping, which is actually pretty floaty and I like that, aerial control feels twice as precise as ground control. Sonic's super speed stages also give you way too many obstacles to try and avoid, especially Crisis City. A goal of mine is to clear every version of every max speed section without getting hit, something only Crisis City is stopping, and I actually managed to do it here. It's a shame I have 2 other versions of the stage left to do. The graphics are a mixed bag. Some are nice, particularly in Tropical Jungle, whilst others look low res and weirdly textured. The character models look good, if not a little thin, and are well animated, but the human models look terrible, and the people in the hub worlds look so awful it's hilarious. The music, on the other hand, is incredible, definitely the best thing about this game. It's my favourite soundtrack in the series actually, and the CGI cutscenes also look great. The levels themselves aren't too bad either. Some of them are rather linear, but a lot of them do encourage exploration and reward the curious player, and have multiple pathways. Boss fights are either tedious or unfair, the loading times are long and extremely frequent, especially in the town missions, and I've encountered some glitches when playing, but not as many as people make out. Now bear in mind, a lot of the time when people say or make videos that show how glitchy the game is, they are causing them on purpose, which I don't think is fair judgment. Yes, the glitches shouldn't be there in the first place, but if you have to actively cause a glitch, then that's really not a fair judgment. The collision detection on the other hand can be bad, and the game has frozen on me one time. And the DLC is definitely a waste of money, I wouldn't bother with that. Sonic 06 is by no means a good game, but I do think that it can be a fun one. Yeah, some of it is for the wrong reasons, but a lot of it is for the right reasons. I think what helps Sonic 06 is the fact that it builds upon an established formula. It may not be of the same quality, but Sonic 06 is Sonic Adventure 3. No guns, no parkour, no also running motion controls or missions. Sonic 06 is the epitome of over-exaggeration for the quality of 3D Sonic games. To call it the worst Sonic game is debatable, but it's not even close to being the worst game ever made. The years spanning 2005 to 2009 were strange for Sonic. Guns and aliens, psychic time travelers, alien genie birds, and God of War with hair before God of War with hair. But just a few months after Sonic Unleashed, we got a game where Sonic carries a sword. Sonic and the Black Knight serves as a spiritual successor to Sonic and the Secret Rings. Like that game, it's a Wii exclusive that relies heavily on motion controls, has Sonic on rails, and is set in a mythological world. This time the story takes place in Arthurian England, and once again, many famous figures from the legend are played by Sonic's friends. The story sees Sonic take on the corrupt King Arthur, who despite the game's title is entirely gold, the Knights of the Round Table, and in a decent plot twist, Merlina the Wizard, with the help of the talking sword Caliburn. Yeah, I don't really care about the story, and I certainly don't care about the dialogue between Sonic and Caliburn. It's incredibly cringy. Gameplay is much better than Sonic and the Secret Rings, largely thanks to the Wii Remote and Nunchuck combination, and the fact that Sonic no longer moves forward automatically, although jumping seems to tend to cause that for some reason on occasion. Constantly shaking the Wii Remote causes my wrists and shoulders to ache, and while it is tiny, the sword swing is delayed. Level design and enemy placements get quite cheap in the second half of the game, and the sword gameplay quickly gets boring and repetitive, and that's my biggest problem with Sonic and the Black Knight. It's just boring. Nothing close to Rise of Lyric or Shadow the Hedgehog, but still dull. It's one of the shortest 3D games, but it feels longer than it is. By far the two best things about Sonic and the Black Knight to me are the graphics and the music. Released during the start of my Sonic high, Sonic Lost World was the first Sonic game I followed after its announcement, and after the success of Sonic Unleashed, Colors and Generations, I was surprised how drastically different this game was. I immediately thought of Super Mario Galaxy, something even Sonic Team has admitted that the game was a bit too similar to. Sonic Lost World has Sonic face off against the Deadly Six, who are so dangerous they have some of the most pathetic boss fights in Sonic history. The game looks great and the music is nice, but the big problem with Sonic Lost World is its lack of focus. Most levels focus on platforming with the occasional parkour and whisk powers, but this game will also have you ice skating, playing pinball, becoming a giant uncontrollable snowball, and that's just in Frozen Factory. There's levels where you do nothing but rail grinding, a level in the dark, Sonic 06 style max speed sections, and whatever the hell the extra world is supposed to be. The game is very automatic in some levels as well. Because of this, the game's difficulty is all over the place. To make matters worse are the red rings and time trials, which have a lot of do or die moments, though nothing like the 3DS version thankfully. The parkour isn't as good as the 3DS version, but unless you're going for the red rings, both it and the wisps are mostly optional save for 1 or 2 times. If you're playing the Wii U version, make sure to download the free Nintendo DLC as it comes with a patch that makes the game noticeably better. Collecting rings will give you an extra life, certain wisps were given analog controls as opposed to the gamepad's gyroscope, and the terribly glitchy pinball tables have now been made much more stable. So if you're going to play Sonic Lost World, play the patched Wii U version or get the PC version. Sonic Lost World is one of those games that's often called bad just because it isn't very good at being a Sonic game. Much like Crash of the Titans and Mind of a Mutant, it's a bit too different for the series, but as a game by itself, it's perfectly adequate. Next up is the most recent 3D game in the series. After the mixed reception of Sonic Lost World, Sega were quick to bring things back to the well-established Boost formula. This was certainly welcome from me, who wanted them to give Generations Boost more original level design, but I was surprised to see classic Sonic back again. After just 5 years, it seemed too soon for a Generations 2. Despite Sega trying to say otherwise, the more of the game that was showed off, the more it seemed like a sequel to Generations. Not only was classic Sonic back, but so were familiar zones. As more of Sonic Forces was shown, the less impressed I was. The game looked very automatic, linear, and unoriginal. The only two exciting things was finally having a boost game run at 60 frames per second on consoles, well, unless you're playing a Switch version, and the Avatar. After millions of Sonic fan art creations, Original the character was finally official. I originally had faith in Forces since the game was coming out of 4 years of development with no specific release date or even a title. But the end result is one of the most disappointing 3D games in the series. Sonic Forces is indeed very automatic that requires little player input. I've always hated the boost to win phrase. Yes, some levels would be a bit boost happy in Unleashed and Generations, but there were always plenty of sections that didn't rely on it, and Sonic Colors rarely needed it at all. But this boost to win phrase I hated so much was finally a reality. You can play some of modern Sonic stages with just one hand. I mean, I'd say he controls a bit better than Generations, but you don't really get the chance to see this since most of the movement is done by the game and the stages rarely go on longer than 3 minutes. The avatar's customization is by far the best part of the game. The number of outfits makes it look like this is where most of the 4 years of development went. The controls, however, are not very good. Acceleration can be unpredictable and even the slow movement feels stiff. Some Wispins can be fun, but the combat often makes it quite a pace breaker. But if there's one thing I'm very tired of, it's the constant comparisons between Sonic Forces and Sonic Mania. Now, comparing classic Sonic makes sense, but can we stop comparing the games as a whole? The two were made by different teams, began development about 2 years apart, and while they are both Sonic games, they have virtually nothing in common besides the characters. What does this have anything to do with this? Nothing. With that said, I like classic Sonic more than the Avatar, but not as much as modern Sonic. His jumps are somehow floatier and heavier at the same time, by which I mean if you let go of the button while he's in the air, Sonic will fall like a rock, but if you keep a hold of the button, he can get quite a lot of airtime. You can actually roll in this game, unlike Generations, which pretty much just had Adventure 2's Somersault. Using it when going down hills does build up a loss of speed, but if you don't roll down, the curves for some reason seem to mess up Sonic's physics. I stated before that Sonic 06 was the epitome of over-exaggeration in 3D Sonic games, but Forces is pretty close to beating it. I frequently see comments saying that Sonic Forces is bad or terrible, some saying it's worse than 06, and may I ask, how? I really don't see by what measure Sonic Forces is a terrible game. It's very flawed, yes, but the flaws are hardly major enough to make it terrible, and to call it bad is one thing, to call it terrible is another. I don't think Sonic Forces is bad, so it certainly doesn't even come close to being terrible. There isn't really a lot in Sonic Forces that's bad, save for a few cheap moments in the levels at the end, but there also isn't really a lot in Sonic Forces that's good. But it is just about the most mediocre 3D Sonic game out there, and definitely one of the most disappointing. Oh boy, here we go. What has to be the most controversial Sonic game out there. When it comes to both adventure games, but especially Adventure 2, opinions simply do not exist. Everything you say is right, and everything you say is wrong, and those who think you're wrong usually respond with insults and whining. So yes, I prefer Sonic Adventure 1. Sonic Adventure 2 is what I consider to be the best of the average 3D Sonic games. For both games, I only own the PS3 ports, which I know are considered to be the worst versions. The story is much more interesting than Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic 06, but like them, it is filled with plot holes, particularly in the last story. The animations are slightly better than SA1, but there's certainly no compliment, as they are pretty damn horrible, and definitely the game's most poorly aged aspect. The voice acting is also improved, but still pretty bad. A lot of it sounds like it's being read directly from the script for the first time, and some things just sound plain weird.
Let's get to work!
Sonic Adventure 2 is more focused than Adventure 1 with just 3 gameplay styles plus the kart racing. Unfortunately, I don't think this game has aged very well overall. The Sonic and Shadow speed stages are fun, but compared to Adventure 1 as well as many other 3D games, the stages can be quite linear. Alternate paths are there, but many stages just have you run down long roads and tunnels. The Tails and Eggman mech stages are my least favourite. Now, Eggman's stages aren't too bad, especially Cosmic War, which despite its length I think could be pretty fun because of the low gravity. Otherwise, the mechs feel clunky with poor turning and heavy jumps, the collision detection can be very questionable, and enemy placements are very often cheap in some levels. Though I appreciate the longer and more fleshed out levels, Gamma just had the better control. Knuckles and Rouge's treasure hunting has also been significantly butchered. They control fine, but the stages are just way too big, and gimmicks like raising the water in Aquatic Mine and Mad Space's god-awful anti-gravity just make them last even longer. But the worst part is the radar. Unlike Adventure 1, the radar can only detect one emerald piece at a time, which is a stupid way of padding the levels out. Wasn't making the stages huge padding enough? Not only that, but dying and restarting also changes the emerald's location. Finally, there's the kart controls. When you're not drifting, it controls incredibly stiff, and when you are drifting, it's incredibly slippery. The additional missions can be very frustrating, and getting all of the emblems is so time consuming. Leveling up 2 Chow to win the races in karate takes hours. It took me about 80 hours in total to unlock Green Hill Zone. It's a good thing that the Chow are separate save data, so they are shared across save files, making later playthroughs much shorter. The graphics still look nice, and I think it somehow looks better than Shadow the Hedgehog. The music is awesome, though it lacks the variety of Sonic Adventure 1's soundtrack. It's largely rock with a bit of jazz and Knuckles' terrible raps. The character themes are for the most part fantastic, however, as is the main theme Live and Learn. Sonic Adventure 2 is enjoyable but too flawed to rank high for me. I only enjoy about 1/4 of the game, hence why I only count it as an average game. When Sonic Adventure 2 was first released in 2001, It was considered to be a great way to celebrate the series' 10th anniversary. The combination of Sonic Riders, Rivals 06 and this abomination was seen as a terrible way to celebrate the 15th anniversary. But with Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Colors bringing Sonic back into popularity, anticipation for the 20th anniversary was high. Not only was Modern Sonic's boost gameplay coming back, but this time he was joined by Classic Sonic. Not only that, but stages and bosses were all being taken from previous Sonic games. It's certainly a safe approach, but for an anniversary game at a time before Sega's overuse of nostalgia, it was a great retrospective for the series, Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 notwithstanding. Modern Sonic has seen improvements in control and is now a better mix of speed and platforming after the rather boost-happy day stages of Sonic Unleashed and the slower platforming heavy stages of Sonic Colors. Compared to Colors, Modern Sonic has much more 3D gameplay aside from, funnily enough, the Sonic Colors stage. His controls are a big improvement from the previous games, and his levels are filled with multiple pathways. The main problem with Modern Sonic is that since Classic Sonic is here, Modern Sonic's 2D sections feel unnecessary. I love the 2D and 3D combination in Sonic Unleashed, but because of Classic Sonic, both Generations and Forces just seem to have too much 2D gameplay, with only about a third to a quarter of the games being in 3D. Having said that, the 2D sections are also great, as is Classic Sonic. His controls aren't one-to-one the old games, but that's just due to the game's engine, and still pretty close, certainly better than Sonic 4 Episode 1. For some bizarre reason, Generations and Colors seem to be getting a lot more hate over the past couple years. May I ask why? The complaints I've seen say the games are now mediocre to terrible, but the reasons are either incredibly nitpicky, such as, again, Classic Sonic's controls, or just plain the opposite to what actually happens in the game. Why does Classic Sonic not having absolutely perfect controls instantly make the game a piece of junk? I just don't see where the logic in that is. And just to make it clear, I will never be a person who craps on someone just because they have a different opinion to me. But it really does annoy me when the hate is either over the top, nonsensical, or they think they can bully and abuse anyone that thinks differently or insult the creators. Sonic Generations is short, but with level design filled with multiple routes, red rings to unlock artwork and background music from other games, and the option to choose how many missions you want to play to collect the boss keys, the replayability is very high. Boss fights, while easy, are fast paced and fun, except for the final boss. I hate this fight. Levels are filled with little details and callbacks to past games. Wanted signs of long lost characters, missions based on gimmicks and levels from older games, Knuckles' love of grapes is mentioned in Sky Sanctuary, the character signs in Empire City from Sonic Unleashed are referenced in Speed Highway. So much love and attention went into this game. It looks beautiful, the remixes are amazing, they even managed to get some Sonic Battle and Knuckles Chaotix music in here. The soundtrack is great, and this credits medley at the end is pure genius, I love it. There are problems I have with the game, however. I have encountered a few glitches, such as getting stuck in the background in 2D segments, or getting stuck in the walls. Hey, look, it really is just like Classic Sonic. On the PS3, the frame rate chugs when a lot is happening, so I would recommend the PC version above all others. I'm not going to mention the mods because I don't own the PC version, and they are not part of the actual game as great as they are. Some of the missions are quite boring, especially if you play all of them. Some are very annoying, and do we really have to have a doppelganger race for every act? I mean, it's impossible to lose this thing, and it comes off as lazy. Sonic Generations has flaws, but it's still a very enjoyable, accessible game with plenty of things for long-time fans to enjoy. The criticism for nostalgia I think is unfair, considering that this game was made for the 20th anniversary, and it was the first, or maybe the second, to really start doing this. It's overused now, but I wouldn't really blame Generations for that. First off, yes, this does count as a 3D Sonic game, but more on that later. Sonic Colors, or Sonic Colors as some of you know it, was the third Sonic game I ever played and pretty much began my Sonic high. After the positive reception of the day stages in Sonic Unleashed, the boost formula and the 3D-2D mixture make a return. Sonic Colors was the first 3D game since Sonic Adventure 2 to be received quite positively by critics and gamers. However, much like Adventure 2, reception seems to have dwindled over recent years. I for one don't see any difference in quality now as I did back when I first played the game, although that was in 2013 rather than 2010. Sonic Colors is a good game. Firstly, this game has my favourite story in the series. I don't mind dark stories, but previous attempts haven't been that successful, from underdeveloped characters to numerous plot holes. Sonic Colors' story is often disliked for being juvenile. There's no one-time monster of the week, it's just Sonic vs Eggman, the way I like it, and the mixture of dark and light-hearted storytelling is perfect and the game is filled with humour.
Leaving so soon? There are no lines, and I've saved the best rides for last. At least let me stab your hand so you can come back in.
I know you're trying to be clever with this whole amusement park pun thing, but it's just coming off lame. Just say you're going to destroy us and stop embarrassing yourself.
Curse you, Sonic! Not only do you foil my plans, but you foil my speeches as well! I work hard on them!
To me, this is a series about a fast-running blue hedgehog and a yellow fox with two tails stopping the plans of a fat egg-shaped scientist with a magnificent moustache. No matter how dark the story is, I am never going to take it too seriously, so I'm glad Sonic Colors doesn't take itself seriously either. The boost is back, but since you need white wisps to use it, it's nowhere near as abusable as it was in Sonic Unleashed. Sonic Colors has much more focus on platforming. While that's fine, I do feel it has a bit too much focus. Most levels are great, but some are extremely short, barely reaching over a minute long. Some levels are also quite slow. Gone is the speed and instead is slow platforming with a rather stiff jump. The double jump is useful, but doesn't help much with changing direction in mid-air. Some levels also have you bouncing on a slow moving spring, and some levels take place underwater, although Sonic can swim in this game, which really makes me ask where the hell did it go afterwards. 3D sections are generally more fast paced, but Sonic Colors is very lacking in 3D. I didn't mind the mixture in Sonic Unleashed since the 2D sections are quite short and just as fast as the 3D sections. In Sonic Unleashed, the mixture starts off fine, but as soon as you complete Tropical Resort, the 3D becomes more scarce. Not only that, but they are often uninteresting. Sometimes it's just quick stepping left and right, sometimes you're just drifting around bends very slowly and the drift itself can be rather unresponsive, and sometimes the levels can be very automatic. Some of the wisps are fun to use, but others are quite situational and underutilized. I like Laser and Spikes, now they're great, as is Hover, but this one can be quite rare, same with Frenzy, although that one does kind of suck in 3D. Drill is fine, but way overused, and Cube is just pointless unless you're hunting red rings. The game is easily one of the best looking games on the Wii, heck I think it looks better than Sonic 06 despite the console's lower power. And the soundtrack is magnificent. Sonic Colors is great, it just lacks in the 3D department and feels a bit too slow. When it comes to the great Sonic Adventure debate, since you're not allowed to like both games for whatever reason, I am on the side of Sonic Adventure 1. Sonic's first true 3D outing that wasn't a racing game, a proof of concept, a fighting game, or whatever Sonic 3D Blast was. Sonic Adventure remained as the Dreamcast's best-selling game. Following Adventure 2's successful port on the GameCube with Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, Sonic Adventure was re-released on the GameCube as Sonic Adventure Deluxe Director's Cut. Besides the smoother character models, I otherwise think the Dreamcast version does look better. DX has a lot of pointless graphical changes and characters often look like they are made out of plastic. The version of Sonic Adventure I own is the HD conversion of DX. The already worsened lighting is somehow made even worse, and for some reason it doesn't support widescreen. So I recommend the Dreamcast version for the graphics, or the GameCube and PC versions which also come with an additional mission mode, improvements to the Chow Garden, and unlockable Game Gear games which were for some reason omitted from the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions. Sonic Adventure has 6 playable characters, each with their own gameplay style. Sonic is the same high-speed platforming as before, only now in 3D. Tails is similar, but you're racing to the finish. Knuckles is hunting for pieces of the Master Emerald. Amy is slower, more puzzle-based platforming, whilst being pursued by the robot Zero. Gamma is shooting, and Big is fishing in what's essentially a prototype Sega bass fishing. As you would expect, I really hate Big's fishing. I don't mind the character, but what does fishing really have to do with a Sonic game? Gamma is fine, but not as fast as Sonic, Tails and Knuckles, and his stages are quite short. Despite being slow, I like playing as Amy, but she is very clunky. Knuckles' stages are much better than SA2 thanks to them being much smaller in size and the fact that the radar can detect multiple emerald pieces at once. Tails' racing is also fun, but again, his stages are too short. Most stages are fun to play, the only ones I don't like are Skydeck and Lost World. No, not that one. No, there we go. The minigames range from decent to boring, especially Sky Chase since you have to play both acts of both Sonic and Tails. Most bosses are pathetic, and while DX does bring some improvements from SA2 and Battle, the Chao Garden still suffers from being SA1's Chao Garden, and I don't really care for the Chao raising anyway. The cutscene animations are atrocious and the voice acting hilariously bad. The soundtrack is awesome and wonderfully varied. But the best thing about Sonic Adventure is the control. To this day I think it has the best control of any 3D Sonic game. It's basically 2D Sonic in 3D with a homing attack and some power-ups. Characters are very responsive and have realistic physics. Going uphill slows you down, going downhill speeds you up, the way it should be. My biggest issue with the game is its stability. This is perhaps the glitchiest 3D Sonic game. The characters and camera can spaz out in the slightest change in terrain, and clipping through walls is easy to do. I consider Sonic Adventure to be glitchier than Rise of Lyric and Sonic 06, probably combined. But with great level design, great gameplay, fishing aside, and great music, Sonic Adventure hasn't aged perfectly, but well enough to still be very enjoyable 20 years later. At number 3 is my second ever Sonic game and perhaps the most forgotten of the Hedgehog's 3D outings. Sonic Unleashed is very much a game of opposites, day and night, fast and slow, and even in terms of reception. The game seems to be very love-hate, and when it comes to the version, most gamers prefer the HD version, whereas most critics prefer the SD version. Then again, this was at a time when it was looking like critics were just hating on Sonic like there was some kind of bias against him because what the hell, and what the hell. This one was reviewed by the same person. While I think that the PlayStation 2 version is the weaker Sonic Unleashed, I still think it's a great game. I love the story. Like Sonic Colors, Unleashed has a great mix of dark and light storytelling, and there's another opposite for you. I only really have 3 issues with it. 1. Why does Sonic become the Werehog because of Dark Guy's power when he was in Eggman's spaceship and Dark Gaia was coming out of the planet? 2. After defeating the Egg Beetle, Eggman barely appears in the story before the climax. And 3. After restoring the first consonant, the story mostly stops before once again picking up before the end. With that said, the voice acting is easily the best from the 4Kids era. The cutscenes look nice, but on the PS2 and Wii it's distracting that they are just compressed from the PS3 and 360 graphics. Having the boost split into bars is a good way of making it less abusable. You have to time boost carefully since rings are generally grouped in 12s, but you need 14 to fill a bar. Sonic also stops boosting the moment he touches a wall. To make this harder, Sonic controls really loosely, though I will say perhaps a bit too loosely. The slightest tilt of the analog stick pretty much instantly sends Sonic to the other side of the screen. The homing attack isn't on the same button as the air boost in this version, and Sonic has all of his abilities from the start. Now levels do have multiple pathways, but they are still rather basically structured and overly spacious. The Werehog stages are much shorter than the HD version, but instead of having one main stage there are multiple acts. At first it's fine when there's only 3, but later when it grows to 4 and eventually 5, it gets tedious. The combat is much more basic than the HD version with very few unlockable moves. The dash is faster and can break objects, but it's so slippery and the Werehog also controls very loosely, especially when jumping. Thought Sonic controlled like a tank in the HD version? Well, it's the complete opposite here. I do think that this version is very accessible. In fact, I would say this is the easiest 3D game, both for the story playthrough and to 100%. The only difficulty comes from a few missions and collecting the item capsules. Day boss fights drag on for a long time, especially the Egg Devil Ray, but the night bosses are fun and fast compared to their slower, more difficult HD counterparts. Except for the Dark Guardian, that's a completely different fight. And Dark Gaia is probably my favourite final boss in the series. The menu hub worlds are slower to get through since you have to talk to people, but at least this version makes the people a part of the story by making them temple guardians. The explorable Gaia gates are filled with fun puzzles, and this version doesn't require you to collect medals to move on with the story. They are simply rewarded to you like emblems from previous games and are only needed for extras. Sonic Unleashed on PlayStation 2 may be the lesser Unleashed, well, besides the mobile version, but it is still a great game that anyone can pick up, and I would say it's a great entry point for the series. Taking up the number 2 spot is the game that introduced me to the series. I sometimes wonder what it would be like if I never played this game. Of the various games I've played, I owe it to my growing enjoyment of platformers, and much of my increasing love for different platformers comes from Sonic. Even though it was the much inferior PS2 version, that version will always hold a special place in my heart. I managed to get a copy of the GameCube version, which is the version I now always play. I love Sonic Hero's story for just how simple it is. Cheesy, light-hearted, and once again doesn't take itself too seriously. I would have liked a little backstory on Neo Metal Sonic, but I can look past that. My only real issue is that Rouge never explained Shadow's past to him, leading to this mess. The voice acting is mostly fine other than Tails, definitely the best from the original cast. CGI cutscenes look fantastic, but the in-level scenes could have been better. The deciding factor of how good Sonic Heroes is the method of unlocking the final story. You need to play the game with all 4 teams. It's repetitive, but each team does bring something different in terms of difficulty and certain areas of some stages. Team Rose is easy with short stages, making them the best option to go after the Chaos Emeralds. Team Sonic is normal, and Team Dark is hard with long stages filled with enemies. Unfortunately, some of Team Sonic stages go on too long, meaning the Team Dark stages go on for really too long. Team Dark is my least favourite part of the game because of it, and many of their extra missions can go on forever, even for the A rank. Team Chaotix are fun, but only when you know where everything is. Since I've played this game so many times, I know where just about everything is. But it still doesn't help with some of them, especially the extra missions. Mystic Mansion? Who came up with this level? Seriously. I don't like the team battles, but the Eggman fights and the enemy rushes are fun. Sonic Heroes has really slippery controls, which after the adventure games is rather inexcusable. Sections of small platforms with enemies are always tense thanks to the combat slipperiness and the severe knockback. Special stages are horrendously glitchy and slippery with no payoff other than the final story, and they somehow made them even more unplayable on the PS2 version. The game is gorgeous even today, and while not my favourite in the series, the music and songs are great. There are a number of levels I don't like, often because of something at the end that usually costs me the A rank. The Rocks and Ocean Palace have questionable rubber band AI, as does the Energy and Power Plant. The collision detection and physics in Casino Park and Bingo Highway are horrible. Everything else, however, is really fun to travel through. Sonic Heroes isn't for everyone, but as my first Sonic game, I love it to this day. So my opinions on 3D Sonic games are unusual, but I stand by them. There are some I hate, some I dislike, some that are perfectly average, and some I enjoy. The poor quality of some titles is very over-exaggerated, and many of the issues in the 3D games can be found in the 2D games. And with them, there are also some I like and some I dislike. I still think Sonic 2, Sonic CD, particularly the remastered version, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and more recently Sonic Mania, are still the best Sonic games. But weirdly, I go back to the 3D games more often. Maybe it's a save feature allowing me to complete them at my own pace, or maybe it's the level select, but I can't truly explain my reasons, I just play them more. Even Sonic 06 is a game I'll go back to just to play a few levels with Sonic or Shadow. I may hate all the games beneath it, but for all the games above it, heck even Sonic 06 itself, I recommend at least giving them a try. But amongst all 15 3D Sonic games, there is one that ranks above all the rest. And my favourite 3D Sonic game is the HD version of Sonic Unleashed for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. For many years, this game haunted me as the better Unleashed that I couldn't play. I didn't own a PS3 until 2014, talk about late to the party. Got Sonic Generations, played it a bit, then I got Sonic Unleashed, played it a bit, then I got Sonic 06, and I played it instead. I'm pretty sure nobody has ever said that before, but I needed to experience Sonic 06 for myself. Right from the start, it was a thrill to finally play what I still think today stands as the fastest Sonic game. And my god, it looks so beautiful. Sega, please remaster this for 8th gen consoles. A game like this with sharper graphics, even if it's only at 30 frames per second, would be amazing, because at the moment, Jesus, it's practically a PowerPoint presentation in some stages. It's so exhilarating to boost through these levels at such speed. Skills and reflexes will be put to the test. Every day stage is a joy. Admittedly, the game is a bit too boost happy at times and some levels are quite straightforward, but a lot of these stages do have multiple pathways and you can skip huge chunks of certain levels. The game has a great mixture of mostly 3D with a handful of short 2D segments that aren't overused like in later games. This is also one of the few games where I don't mind quick time events. Besides some of the later and extra levels, most don't result in death if you fail. Plus, the faster you do it, the more points you get, and in the night stages, you get extra points for using them to kill enemies. Not a fan of the tornado defense stages though. The Werehog is much better in this version. The combat has many different moves to be unlocked. I find platforming easier in this version due to the Werehog's heavier jump, although he sometimes loses his drop shadow for some reason, and when it is there, it isn't really helpful. Many of the Werehog's larger combos can be unresponsive to button presses, but since I rarely use them I don't really mind this. One thing that is annoying is when the Werehog randomly decides to change direction when I tap forward, which thankfully didn't happen while I was recording. And unlike the SD version, Sonic can't swing on dark bats, he just grabs them and lets go, which can make going across bottomless pits, especially when the bats are moving, to be quite awkward. One of my biggest problems with this game is the medal collecting. You need so many, and while they're easy to grab in the night stages, they cause them to last upwards to 30 minutes. And in the day stages, you'll most likely run past them, especially those hidden in alcoves and alleyways. At least I can find some of them in the hub world. Hub worlds are fully explorable yet small, and while no one's plot important in this version, many have their own stories to tell. Some are just there, but many offer me missions and rewards, and it makes me feel happy when I help them out. Except for Yasmin. Thought Eggman Land was hard, tried playing the fine Yasmin mission. 2/3 of arid sands with many more obstacles and a very strict time limit. Forget it, Samio, your sister can go and die in the desert! Sorry. Difficulty is my other big problem with Unleashed HD. I wouldn't recommend this as someone's first Sonic game. The later levels get pretty hard and enemies get much stronger, and of course there's Eggman Land. Even the early extra stages are hard. Many are short and focus on one of Sonic's abilities, but they are hard. Daytime bosses are awesome and much faster to beat in this version. Nighttime bosses are mostly the same, but the Dark Moray is much harder since you have to hit him in specific places. Egg Dragoon is cool, but where SD Dark Gaia is my favourite final boss in 3D Sonic, HD Dark Gaia sucks. It's better now for Wait a While Later, but it lasts way too long. I don't like how the Gaia Colossus controls, and the speed sections have very strict time limits. Until the day comes where I have to 100% Sonic and the Secret Rings, I currently rank this as the hardest Sonic game to fully complete. S ranks, town missions, 400 medals, books, records and tapes, hot dog missions, even in Eggman Land. You can't even get a ranking on the final boss for the first time, for some reason you have to fight him again. And screw the DLC! These are extremely hard just to finish, getting S ranks are next to impossible. Dragon Road Act 2-2, who thought this level was remotely decent? It took me hours to S-rank this level. Everything in this level will kill you. It is filled with cheap enemies and obstacle placements plaguing every lap. This is easily the worst level I have ever played in a video game. But when it comes to just the story and revisiting levels just for fun, Sonic Unleashed is a great game. I like it more than Sonic 1. Great story, great sense of speed, great levels, at least in the main game. My second favourite soundtrack in the series, the game looks beautiful, frame rate drops aside, and even the Werehog is fun to play. Heck, despite my hate towards the daytime DLC, I think the nighttime DLC is some of the best way to experience the Werehog. So many criticise this game due to the Werehog or the stiff control. On this I can agree, but at the same time I'm willing to look past the controls because this was the first time they gave a go at the boost gameplay in 3D and on home consoles, and it was made by Sonic Team and not DIMS. It's such a shame because it's so obvious how much love went into this game. Even if you don't like Unleashed, there's no doubting how much love went into it. From the wonderfully detailed graphics, the Dreamcast and Eggman's Eggmobile, Sonic 06 appearing on the newspaper, and the developers even added a subtle apology to Sonic 06's quality. Sonic Unleashed may be tough, but I feel the more you play it, the better it gets. So yeah, I feel 3D Sonic games are very overemphasized for poor quality. Of the 15 games, I only consider 5 of them to be bad. The others can all be good times, just some do it better than others. So if you ever feel turned away from a 3D Sonic game, I recommend giving it a try yourself. When it comes to the future, I really don't care what it is as long as it's enjoyable. I'd love Sonic Adventure 4, or at least a remake of the first 2 adventure games, and after all these years, I don't think it would hurt to remake or finish Sonic 06. And I would love a Sonic Heroes 2. but as long as it's enjoyable, I don't care. Sonic the Hedgehog is awesome.